In 2011, protesters from North Africa to the Persian Gulf took to the streets in demonstrations few thought possible. They stood up against cruel dictators and autocrats, and railed against government corruption and mismanagement that had mired much of the Arab world in poverty for decades. Liz Sly, the Washington Post's Beirut bureau chief, covered the Arab Spring from the beginning.
People thought that they would get new freedoms, there would be democracy, new prosperity would come. There was hope, there was anger, but above all, at the very beginning, there was hope. Of course, it all went horribly wrong.
Out of the cauldron of the Arab Spring, only Tunisia would lurch toward democracy. Bahrain's government continues to crack down on dissidents, journalists, and human rights activists. Libya and Yemen descended into chaos. And Syria descended into hell.
President Bashar al-Assad revealed himself to be prepared to use any kind of force, up to and including the use of chemical weapons, to stay in power. And if there's one lesson from this Arab Spring that we can learn, it is that a dictator who is prepared to use brute force will be able to hold on to power, no matter how much people power you have, no matter how many demonstrations you have.
And in Egypt today, many say that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is even more authoritarian than the man ousted 10 years ago, Hosni Mubarak. But it was here, in the Arab world's most populous country, that demonstrators and counter-demonstrators became one of the most indelible symbols of the Arab Spring, centered in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Griff Whitty was the Washington Post's deputy foreign editor at the time.
The Mubarak regime began to bus in people from the countryside who were supporters to challenge the protesters in the square and to fight with the protesters in the square. And what had been a standoff between protesters and the police quickly became an all-out civil conflict between supporters of the Mubarak regime and opponents.
The Washington Post's Will England was dispatched from his bureau in Moscow to help cover one of the biggest stories of the year.
Probably the day that stands out the most is the day that there was the camel charge. Some supporters of Hosni Mubarak had organized these camel drivers to charge the square, and it was unbelievable. It was this ridiculous stunt. You know, they created a ruckus, and then they left, and that was it.
I mean, looking back on it all now, it's actually very hard to remember the hope that was experienced at that time.
Over the past decade, hundreds of thousands of people died and millions became refugees. A bloody and costly uprising, but that doesn't mean it's over. What was started a decade ago may have just been the beginning.
It isn't over because the past few years have seen new Arab Springs, if you like. Some people call it a second Arab Spring. We had the toppling of the president in Sudan, in Algeria, small protests in Jordan, and Lebanon and Iraq have had huge, what they call revolutions. They haven't revolutionized anything yet, but they're not over either. They are ongoing. So yes, a lot of people think that this is a rolling and long-term form of change that could take many different forms in the years to come, but that it will come eventually.